Dana Ross. And he gracefully decided at 10 o'clock last night to present today. And Kat Anderson, I made a mistake and gave Kat the wrong date. And so she thought we were going to do it on Sunday. And she had a scheduling conflict for today, but she'll be back at some point in the future. She does have a new book out, so we're excited to see her. But we are honored to have Dana. And I'm just going to read his quick little bio. So since his arrival in Oregon at the age of 21, Dana Ross has pursued butterflies and moths throughout the Pacific Northwest with regular attention to the unique and biodiverse fauna of Southern Oregon. His presentation will highlight various aspects of his 30-plus year of professional butterfly and moth inventory and monitoring work in the region, as well as what's on tap for 2026. So with all that, I am very lucky to have Dana here and really looking forward to this presentation. We did want to have Dana at some point, but our schedule was inundated, and here we are. We have Dana here today. So,
do you want to be the slide?
Yeah, okay. and we could probably, if we want it to be dangerous, we could put that right there.
Is that a way of life?
Yeah. And yeah,
okay, looks good. Yeah, so kind of came up with the title and began to put slides together, and we are going to be seeing butterflies and moths. I've kind of got it in little blocks of slightly different subject matter, but it's all along the lines of what it says there. Just don't hold me too tight to any exact definition. I think you'll enjoy it, though. I tried to make sure there was plenty of interesting photos and ideas and past experiences. So we'll just kind of take it from there. I should back up just a second, if you would. I have to say that those of you who know Rob Santry know that he's just an amazing photographer, and his strength, as I knew it, was with butterfly and light photographs, kind of classic field guide stuff. Apparently he's gotten into wildflowers lately. I don't know if he's been to your meeting or interacted with anybody along those lines, but you might, if you haven't already, try to get a hold of him for a photo talk at some point, because he's an excellent photographer and a very knowledgeable guy. But I just want to make sure that Linda Kaplan, who may or may not have much in the way of photographs here, but has been a long time regular field companion, gets credit because she also takes lots of photos and has done well with her additions to field guides and so forth. And then I put in Butterflies of America based on just a history of turning to Andy Warren, who was at least for a while there at the McGuire Center in Florida, and kind of one of the main guys on the butterfliesamerica.com website. So there you have that. Okay. So I don't know quite how I came across this, but I was reading something, somewhere, and this just appealed to me. So I'll just read it for if you can't see it. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. When I became a man, I put away my childish things. That's from the Bible. Except for my butterfly net, that's from me.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Getting used to this mic.
Okay, next.
Thank you.
There we go. I just threw this one in there because I love seeing people with butterfly nets. I are one. And there's a story behind each one of these, but I won't go through it. I have quite a few slides to show you. Nonetheless, it just kind of represents a few of the moments out there in the field, some planned, some unplanned. Anyway, we'll just let it go at that. But, a lot of people have a good time when they're out there with a net, so that they can see the close-up butterflies and moths and other insects that otherwise you kind of miss. But if you can get a net on them and look at them in a little jar and get a good close look at what they're all about, it can really improve the experience. Next. So a little bit of background about me. I've pretty much been at this my entire life. I actually, even when I was 10 months old and I was learning how to walk, my mother says I was learning how to walk between the butterfly chairs. So that kind of takes me all the way back. But anyway, I recall my first butterfly was the morning cloak when I was about 4 years old in West LA. And my mother made me a net and off I went, and I've never stopped. Fishing has been the only real competing interest hobby-wise. And then as one ages, one questions certain things that seem beyond what you can see, feel, and touch and hear. So kind of blending factual science and spirituality, the unknown that could well be out there beyond our senses is also very interesting to me. My travels have always been towards tropical destinations because of the insects. So those have been just some of my greatest traveling memories. I eventually, after my lost 20s, I wasn't ready for college out of high school, so took some time off, but eventually found a home in the entomology department at Oregon State, and the rest is kind of history. My focus has been on the conservation of rare, threatened, and endangered butterflies, but with the rather drying up of federal funds, one has to get a little creative. So I'm pushing the moth and more community aspect of things, more so than looking for, federal funds, which are less reliable for somebody like me. I've done a lot of baseline inventory work. I believe maybe 9 different Pacific wildlife refuges. I've been to at least once. Places like Malheur, I've been to like 6 or 7 times, trying to cover the seasonality of when moths and butterflies are flying. So ultimately they'll get a baseline list, which of course is always changing a little bit, but that's kind of the goal. It's all original seeking of documentation, because a lot of these insects, it's changing, but they haven't really been pursued like birds and plants and mammals and fish. So we're still working on the insects. I do teach an annual field course or two at the Siskiyou Field Institute in Selma. It's always a good time. It's just kind of adult learning most of the time. Occasionally I have a kid with a mom, which makes it fun. But it's pretty easy going, and we're out in the field learning as we go. So we're dealing with the live insects in their environment, which is rewarding. And it seems like if you stick with something long enough and get a couple degrees there, you find yourself as courtesy faculty. So now I have 7-day, 24-hour access to volunteer for them in the insect collection. That's about it. Okay, next. So, none of us really are doing what we do of our own accord. So just a quick history and some of the people that have been a part of my butterfly moth life. On the left, the book, that's Ernst Dornfeld, who kind of wrote the original real book of detail on the Oregon butterflies in 1980, I believe. And I got to see him speak, and then the next thing I knew, he'd passed. But he did a wonderful job. It was quite a guy. Actually, I got to follow up and duplicate some of his work at McDonald Forest near Corvallis, counting and identifying butterflies along the same route he had done for years. So it was kind of fun to have those 2 data sets to compare. In this picture here on the left is Paul Hammond, who I work with constantly and have for over 30 years. He's my moth mentor and my butterfly reference guy. On the right, you may recognize Bob Pyle, Robert Michael Pyle, who, if he's not been here to speak, boy, he's an amazing guy. Went through a rough patch, but he seems to be doing really well these days, and just a tremendous nature writer and gentleman. Next. Each year, end of October, typically, we have a Pacific Northwest Lepidopterist workshop, which is just anybody who has an interest in butterflies or moths at any level, from kids to emeritus to professional, amateur, everybody counts. And people will bring in beautiful drawers of specimens. We'll focus on certain groups so that we can learn more about them each year. And it's just a lot of fun. I know Christina, you were there last year promoting what we're working on now with the Moth project, so which I'll get to in a little bit. Thank you. So Dr. Jeffrey Miller was mentioned. He was my graduate professor, and I met Paul at the same time and was working in the lab. Here's Paul working with one of my samples from I think it's Mal here, but the guy is just diligent, interested, always helps me out with my processing of moth samples. And in return, I do imaging and help him make plates for his books and things like that. So it's a fairly even trade, but I think I got the better end of the deal. And then here, John Pelham on the left, who wrote the catalog of butterflies in the United States and Canada. It was just a tremendous character on top of that. As often at the meetings, he's constantly working on butterfly stuff with Caitlin Labar, who's Bob Powell's co-author on the latest field guide to the butterflies of Cascadia, Pacific Northwest. Amy Warren on the right wrote the 2005 Butterflies of Oregon book, which is still tremendously informative and worth referring to. He's quite the character. Here he's got a grin on his face because they're up in the Arctic and he's found a new species of butterfly for North America, which is a rare feat anymore. Next. And then two friends who unfortunately are gone now, but Judith Floyd Preston from Kansas were decades and decades involved in the Lepidopterus Society, Butterfly and Moth Society. You know, they played every role in that. They spent their summer vacations and their retirement going on constant expeditions around North America, talking to all the collectors and people who knew what was what, and obtaining a series of specimens from every species and subspecies known, and taking those mounted to the McGuire Center and donating them to the University of Florida. So they've just contributed a lot. Next. And then a couple of my most faithful field companions. Linda Kaplan, I think, pretty much pulled me down here on a regular basis, got me to start teaching at Siskiyou Field Institute, and is always interested in any butterfly foray. So she's all in. And Garrett Pearson was with me as just a constant companion for many years, and really between the two of them really made what we could document that much better with 3 sets of eyes and 3 nets, and because nobody sees it all. You're looking this way, something happens over there. So I appreciate both. And this is a couple of years old now. It doesn't include the current Moth project, but basically these are organizations that have funded me for various projects through the decades. And a little tougher to get anything out of the federal system, although Fish and Wildlife Service still can offer a little bit now and then. But I'm just grateful to everyone who's been a part of the process. Next. So I'm not gonna go crazy. When I teach the butterfly class at the Siskiyou Field Institute, I tend to, I think, overwhelm people with the amount of butterflies that are in the area. And there's too many of them that look alike. So when I'm, going through the this and the that and the other, it's like, I'm sorry, they all look the same. You think these are bad, wait till you see moths. But at any rate, I just thought I would highlight a handful of butterflies from the region that are of conservation concern, that have had effort put into survey and monitoring, and in some cases petitioning for listing. But just to familiarize yourself with a few of the species of interest around here. Marron skipper may ring a bell for some of you. The stronghold for this subspecies is in the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. There are also populations on the coast, of which the Oregon coastal ones look to be, it's hard to tell if they're more related to this habitat, such as the monument, or the redwoods habitat of Northern California, where the prairies there hold some populations. And then there are further populations up in Washington that are just yet a little bit different. This is one that that feeds on some of the native grasses. So it's really important that we sustain those, and it's real fussy about the habitat. It's kind of like that, it's like that, not too dry, not too wet type of a habitat, and often is in little headwater moist areas. Okay, next. There we go. Johnson's hair streak, maybe something you've heard of, maybe not. There was a big effort, oh boy, how long ago was it now? Maybe 10, 12 years ago, with a guy named Ray Davis in the Forest Service. And one of my other mentors, Dave McCorkle, who had done a lot of work with Johnson's hair streak. And the three of us got together and put together what we could for information, and then put together a protocol for surveys, which ended up being more about the larvae on the dwarf mistletoe host plant, which are easier to find than the adults, which spend most of their time in the trees, and you don't see them come down but once in a blue moon. So by sampling the dwarf mistletoe in the right places at the right time, you could eventually find little caterpillars and either rear them out, or they found a molecular marker that they could use to tell that it's that species versus similar ones. Okay. This, I believe, is Linda Cappen's favorite butterfly, the Sierra Nevada blue. It's another little fragile headwater butterfly whose caterpillars feed on shooting star. So, it's really a lovely little situation. They're up in moist headwater meadows. Here's an adult on bistort, which is one of their favorite little nectaring plants that also grow in those same habitats. But probably the best population that I've run across, and fortunately it's in a nice protected area, is at the Bigelow Lakes Basin and upper Bigelow Lake area. So we see those every year when we do our annual butterfly count in early July. So this year will be late June because of weather and dryness, but we'll see what happens. Okay. The Coronis fritillary, the fritillaries are notoriously difficult as a group because of all the subspeciation and convergence and variability in populations with their wing patterns. They all feed on violets of one sort or another. This is one that has a pretty limited range, pretty much the Illinois Valley. And it can be quite numerous in season, which is like June, July, into August for the later females. But at any rate, it's fairly localized, and it and another butterfly, the Zerini fritillary, subspecies gloriosa, look a lot alike. They're both gorgeous insects, and at the right time, the right place, not uncommon. So it's just one that Jason Riley from the BLM Grants Pass has spent time mapping and searching for more information about it. There's still much to be learned. I should also say that other butterfly, the Sierra Nevada blue, is one that Jason and another biologist from Roseburg went out and found a bunch of new populations for in the Cascades and these little sensitive meadows. So yes.
That's good. They don't feed on fritillaries.
Right, this is a fritillary flower. Yeah, no, and I don't know why they're each called that, but for whatever reason, no.
And by the way, Linda Cappen is zoomed in.
All right, good to know.
On these butterflies, the dorsal is orange with a very fine black reticulation, which is a little more suggestive of the flower.
Sounds good. Yeah, this is a notorious group. Just a couple of years ago, again, the guy I worked with, Paul Hammond, along with David McCorkle, and their decades of work exploring North America, collecting butterflies, rearing butterflies, accepting specimens from others who were where they couldn't get to, put together a new monograph on the fritillary butterflies in North America, which was just amazing to do. I got to create every one of the 101 plates of 28 images each. So I felt like I contributed properly to that effort, but it's quite a magnificent effort. The seaside hoary elfin is one of our coastal dune species. It's Jeff Miller mentions in his So I give him credit for the orange book that's going around, the new Butterfly Atlas, because he put the last 3 years of his life into making it happen. Although Neil and Paul and I have, accumulated a lot of hours and effort along the way, but Jeff really made it happen. So this is only known, it was known from 3 locations that I'm aware of, and I did a lot of the original survey work on it. But we may have lost the one population to the north near Waldport on the coast. Development and succession and weeds and loss of the beaches with the, ocean rise have all played a part. But it's a lovely little butterfly. It's one of the first ones that come out in the spring, and it feeds exclusively as a caterpillar on kinnikinick or bearberry. So
Coastal.
it's right there in the dunes.
Connecticut.
Around the kinnikinick. And there's a couple of other elephants that are also brown that you find in the same area. So it takes a little practice to distinguish them. There's the brown elephant, another one called the western pine elephant, which is also there. Okay. And then one other butterfly, again, this was only described, I believe, in 1998 by the Californian lepidopterists, John and Tom Emmel and Sterling and Toon. And this is a species that has a very wide range at the species level, but it's one that also sort of isolates and subspeciates fairly easily. So in this case, you're dealing with one called subspecies littoralis of the shoreline, however you want to define that. And although it can be very common where there's adequate habitat, again, in the Lake Earl area, it's also one of concern. It seems to be very limited in its proper habitat. Yeah.
Is this the same butterfly and that's just the underside of it, or
Okay, yeah, thank you. Let me explain that. On the left, you have the male, which in many species of blue butterflies are the brightly blue colored one. And on the right is the female, which in this case has some blue specks, but they can be anywhere from solid brown to maybe a third blue. But that's a pretty typical sexual dimorphism pattern that you'll see in the blues and a lot of the gossamer winged insects. David, do you have a comment? You're probably ready. Okay.
Well, a lot of blues have that dimorphism, the gender.
Yeah. And it can make it tricky when you're in an area with multiple species to, be sure of yourself unless you get one sitting on.
All more patterns to learn.
Yeah, right. Keep you busy. Yeah, give you something to do. Okay, next. And then, of course, there's the monarch. And this is a butterfly that, having grown up in Southern California amidst the hordes and the wintering hordes in the eucalyptus trees, it's amazing to me that we have contributed to its demise, and it's obvious that we're at least in part to blame with our development and use of chemicals and stuff. Next slide. Yeah, this was just like the typical monarch scene. I'm sure many of you, any familiar with monarchs, have seen shots like this. In Mexico, where the eastern population primarily ends up each winter, it's just acres and acres of millions and millions of butterflies typically. A lot of the trees have been cut through time. They used to go to like pines and Pacific Grove and so forth, and then they adjusted when those were disappearing to the eucalyptus trees, which had a similar profile or insulating quality along with leaves they could hang on to. But we're losing various aspects of their resources, from overwintering grounds to, of course, milkweed, which people have really taken to planting, which does in fact benefit these butterflies. Just make sure they're the native milkweeds and not some foreign thing which can actually kill them because their toxins are different. Here's just a quick graph on the left that kind of shows you from 1997, when we had 1.2 plus million, and these are the western monarchs divided into West Coast, East Coast by the Rockies, pretty much, I guess. Through time, even though the blue line, which goes up, shows the number of sites monitored, which is increased with interest. and disappearing butterflies. Here we have just, here's 2019, 2020. This looks like a zero, it's not. We still have, what, over 10,000 West Coast monarchs, but the number is severely low. And hopefully we can just keep working hard to keep that set of populations with us. And then I wanted to mention a few of our not so conservation, in need of conservation, but some species that are simply unique to Oregon in this region. A number of these will also be found in California, which is perhaps, you know, the lion's share where the populations are, but we get enough of the California influence here that we get to share some of these really pretty spectacular species. Next. Perhaps of which the most arguably could be the great purple, which is actually a blue color and can go either by the great blue or great purple hair streak. But the first generation of this one's already come out. I've been doing some work over at the Selberg Institute backside of Emigrant Basin, and Samson Creek has a nice population that shows at the flowers and at the mud. So I was able to come across 7 or 8 of these a week or two ago. And they're just thrilling to see. They're just so exotic, like mini little morphos or something. Okay. And then the mascot butterfly of Pollinator Project Rogue Valley, Christina. Yeah, I do. It's like, that was such a good choice. When I first saw your logo, I was like, yeah. So it's a butterfly that feeds paintbrush and pretty localized populations. There's a couple of subspecies that kind of work their way from where we are in this part of Oregon into California, but they're pretty similar looking, a little hard to differentiate. But anyway, just a beautiful little butterfly that if you're lucky enough, you'll run into an area that has these pretty much maybe May, June, July, kind of in that realm, depending on habitat and elevation. Okay. And then one butterfly again that this part of Oregon is well known for with the Lepidopterus is the Indra swallowtail, also called the short tail swallowtail. The short little tails on the ends. They vary in length, but overall, this is a pretty typical subspecies shastensis. There's a similar subspecies, but typically with longer tails and slightly different on the band width and so forth. Which is subspecies Indra, the nominate subspecies that you find kind of in the northeastern portion of the state for the most part, from Deschutes on over. Okay. And then the California crescent, which is, it can be a confusing one if you see it for the first time and you think you know your butterflies. The more common species are the more bright orange Mylida crescent. And these are butterflies, you know, silver dollar size or so. And then the field crescent, which is somewhat like this dorsally, but you know, there's enough of a difference that it does take looking close, but you can generally see the difference. It's just it's fun when you come across these because they're not that common or widespread. Next. And then finally is the Rocky Mountain Parnassian. We have a Clodius Parnassian that feeds on bleeding heart at lower elevations typically. And then when you get up into the rocky higher elevations, particularly in the Siskiyous and in California, you'll see the Rocky Mountain, which feeds on, help me out, the succulent, little succulent plant on the rocks up there.
Sedum, yeah.
Sedum, thank you.
Oregano.
There you go.
Sedum Oregon, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful butterfly, very bright white with a big red spots on there. Typically flying July and August. Okay, a few more folks. It's really funny because through time, we have Janine Moy of Vesper Meadow. Let's see, Linda's here. She's always been my assistant. You know, Charlie Shells from the Marchman, now retired, was Charlie. And maybe that's it for people who I think are relatively well known, at least to me. But it's always a good time. This year we've got a 2-day course, which will pretty much focus on the butterflies of the Illinois Valley through SFI. But typically we've taken a third day and gone into the monument and have a series of meadows that we kind of checklist the butterflies for. So always a good time. Okay, then here we get to that orange book that's been hopefully getting around a little bit. Again, this is the effort that began back in about 1994 when the first black and white dot map atlas came out. Just had a page of Oregon with black lines for counties and then black dots on there. Well, Jeff has really gone bunkers and made this thing very modern with topographical color oriented mapping. And he's worked hard to get as many verified location, species, subspecies records for butterflies, which is a big part of my contribution, as long as museums and private collectors, and Neil Bjorklund, who does a lot of butterfly photography and is very good at cataloging what he photos. David, I'm sure you've contributed something to Jeff's effort. Yeah. So at any rate, this is the new updated atlas that probably will be treasured for at least the next 10 years or so. Granted, it's a hard copy, but some of us enjoy hard copies. So for now, it's what we got on the scale. And I can vouch for it as a co-author. So here's just a few examples of the pages that are in there. This is the first volume, which is the sort of classic, distribution maps, but glorified as it were. And then Jeff's done a nice job of giving important information about the butterfly as it pertains to range or host plant or relationships to other butterflies or subspecies. So you notice there's two subspecies here. You get the white, let's see, is that, I got them mixed up. Okay, Herri to the north, which feeds on golden chinkapin primarily. And then you've got coast live oak feeders, Lorqueni, which is down in this part of the country. And if any of you know the botanist, Denny Albert, he and Jeff together worked to really expand the distribution and the dots and the locations of this butterfly. So it's a fun one. It was also featured in Bob Pyle's movie, The Dark Divide, if you've seen that.
Dana, I'm puzzled because the golden hair streaks I know around here are definitely on chinkapin.
And there is some that you get at least over in this aspect, and perhaps at sites where, along this boundary somewhat that,
Okay,
yeah, but it's worth, Jeff's sort of the expert on this thing.
okay.
So any information.
The massive of I know is right near the Jackson Klamath County line.
Okay, and that makes
Fish Lake.
sense. That makes sense. Yeah, just getting on the east side or about. The margin white is our native version of the cabbage butterfly that eats your broccoli and other crucifers in the garden. This is a good one. It's not a pest, and it's quite beautiful. Here's one of my very few contributions here, underside of the butterfly here. But all these whites feed on crucifers, so the problem butterfly from Europe just knows no bounds. But these are more tuned into the native species along forest edges and openings. Okay. Spey area calliope, one of the several fritillaries in the state. And you can see the subspeciation that takes place here, where you have kind of a Malaheur Hawaii subspecies, which likely continues outward. Then you have kind of the more widespread, white semi-vertis. And then we get a Cascadian population or two, and more of a Siskiyou subspecies. And this here actually represents an extinct population that only a handful of records are known from the Willamette Valley. Anyway, it just gives you a sense of our butterflies and how they subspeciate across the state, which correlates with host plants and ecoregions. Next. So this is the second volume. It's called Synthesis. And I think Jeff did a great job with this. He really took the information that he put out in the first volume and really looked for stories and patterns and just some neat ideas dealing with caterpillar food plants, which are critical where butterflies can be. Just because the food plant's there doesn't mean the butterfly will be, but without it, forget it. Unless you're a migratory species. But he's just done a wonderful job. This here represents all the range limits of the butterflies in the state. And those show up a little better as species richness throughout the state, with the more red being the higher richness areas, and you can see right there. So it's pretty interesting stuff. Next. And this gives you a sense of ecoregions, and he called this the Cascadia Siskiyou territories, sort of showing which butterflies on a larger scale share that distribution of those generalized regions. Next. And then this is the short-tailed swallowtail. There's two subspecies, the shastensis that I mentioned first down low here, with its host plants, which are designated by the two colors there, and the diamonds for the butterfly. And then the big large circles here are all for this other Indra subspecies. And he likes playing with the host plant correlation with overlap of the species that take to those subspecies when there is this sort of specialization and speciation. This is a little busy, but it just gives you another sense of what Jeff is enjoying bringing to your attention. And this is butterfly species and family, which caterpillars are species-specific food plant specialists and the corresponding plant species. So you get everything from real generalists out there in the butterfly world, whose caterpillars can feed on many families of plants, whereas others are so fine-tuned and specialized that they can really survive as adults caterpillars on a single plant if the adults can feed on the flowers of that same plant. So it's just interesting. And what's interesting too is that the Lycaenidae, which are the gossamer winged butterflies, the blues, the coppers, the hair streaks, really tend to do a lot of this subspeciation, which he shows here. Anyway, this is all for sort of studying if one can get a copy or chooses to invest in the two volumes. So we're going to dash into moths here. I've really focused as much on moths as butterflies, pushing them more over the last several years, just to sort of bring them into the light. And I think, not that I did it, but suddenly it seems like the interest in moths has really picked up over the last few years. iNaturalist has really become popular. People on their phone cameras can take nice photos that are identifiable. People like to make lists and see who get the most species or most photos. So it's kind of a fun competition and a way to keep a checklist for any site that you want to spend time at, your backyard or a favorite spot. You can make lists for all those, and iNaturalist is the place to go online to make that happen. Back up if you would. So an interesting thing is that you think about it, okay, 120 butterflies or something like that in the mountains here. Well, that's 10% of the Lepidoptera butterflies and moths. So that means 90% as moths, what's total 10 times that at least. So, when it comes down to it, because the moths are less well studied, there's new species being discovered every year. And this is what in part makes this area so interesting, because it's not a well-studied area. As few areas in Oregon are, maybe around population centers more, or a few favorite outdoor destinations. But what I've always worked towards is trying to inventory an important site that has plant diversity, plant community diversity, is representative of an ecoregion, and just try to get a good baseline sense of what's there. which I will do with butterflies, moths, and other insects. So currently, my focus, and those many people in the area right now that have volunteered for it, is to document the moths of the Siskiyou Crest, which is a large area. But this is year one, and we're giving it a shot. And the whole idea with this is choosing the Siskiyou Crest because it's an area that is so biodiverse, as evidenced by other life forms, and under threat continuously from people who want to use, take, develop, the resources for their desires. So in order to keep it, productive and sustainable and there for everybody, I'm hoping that we can add perhaps as many as 1,000 species of moths verified for the area. Next, please. So again, this just runs back to me as the 4-year-old child, where this was my gateway moth that the neighbor kid brought in. And when I saw that, that was it. Next, please. So typically when I'm doing refuges or solo transect sampling, I'll use these bucket traps because you can be very efficient hitting a bunch of plant communities or elevational gradient if you have enough batteries and traps and endurance to do it all day long and pick them up the next morning. Next. And this is what one can find in these traps. There's a pesticide called a no-pest strip that goes in there that knocks the moths down. And this will be a typical, bottom of a bucket, and some of the more beautiful moths that will show up from time to time. And of course, we value something like this much more than some little brown speck like that. But everybody counts. They're all doing something different. Next. This was during some sampling at the Crater Lake National Park, which was an amazing place to work with full support, living in the ranger's cabin and running around by day with a net after butterflies and putting out moth traps at night, and just incredible. But on occasion, these are Pandora moths, and you'll get the lodgepole pine and other pines falling victim under stress typically, and these caterpillars will do very well, and the adults will come out by the bazillions. So it was during one sample period that I had a couple of traps that I don't know what the little moths were that made it through, but there's about 400 Pandora moths in each of those white buckets sitting in one spot for the night. That's the abundance of those at times. Next. And then I wanted to share just a little bit more of what the not so much here, but Oregon, Pacific Northwest moths look like. I had made these posters for a couple of the refuges a while back. So in one, it kind of gives you a sense of some of the more charismatic species, colorful species, which is good. We have those because there's not as many species at Umatilla, kind of a tough area to work in, as elsewhere. But on the other hand, you have maybe not so charismatic, but incredible diversity of noctuid moths in the genus Uxoa, of which we have more than 100 species in the Pacific Northwest, but there's 31 of them right there just at Malheur. Next. And then you're going to get to kind of the final push. So I had been interested in being able to formally sample down here. I had a couple of false starts on the Cascade Siskiyou National Monument, did some pilot work for free way back when, and Charlie Shuttle's got a tiny bit of money that I could play with moths with. But anyway, the Siskiyou Crest became the area of true interest. So I came down last year when there was growing interest and put on moth nights at 3 sites that were chosen as doable on 2 of them on private lands and one we got a Forest Service permit for. So go ahead, next slide. So on the 19th, and this is always done around the new moon week because you have minimal interference from the moon for your light trap, which they're using to navigate by and end up going to. So if any of you have heard of Mark's Pollinator Garden up on the east side of Mount Ashland, it's well known for its many butterflies and won a national award through the North American Butterfly Association for a top garden, butterfly garden. I thought, what a perfect place to include in a moth study. Let's not, leave that alone. Let's see how many moths we can find. So for one night, I had folks who wanted to join me come, and I set up a couple of these big white sheets on A-frame supports and had black lights and 12-volt batteries, and we waited for dark, and then the moths started coming in, and I had all these little files. So we tried to vial everything that looked different. And so that's where we get like the Moth Squad of 7. That's coined by Maya Black in Silver. But we're up at 5,500 feet. And in the course of that evening, and then first thing the next morning with the strays that came in during the night, we came up with 50 moths. And of those, there were 29 different species. Pretty good. Forget the Florida ID. We'll talk about that. And of those, compared to within the 3 sites for the moth lists, 14 or 48% of this site was unique species to those 3 sites that 3 consecutive nights. Next. And then we downslope south to the Colstein, where Maya and Bo live, and we put a couple of sheets out down there. This is a big both incense cedar area, and then the oaks are just right out by the road. So we got a nice couple of different habitats to sample. And a little lower down, 3,500 feet, 4 of us working it. We sampled 69 moths and came up with 34 species. Pretty good. Next. And then kind of the grand finale was the 3rd night, and by now I'm really short on sleep. But you make it work. So we had like 9 people up there. It was great. Folks that wanted to see what it was like, more folks I think from the Applegate area. Luke and Susie, if you know them, they were up there as well. It made it fun. And so we're now up around 7,000 feet, kind of where the PCT crosses between Observation and Dutchman. Just a beautiful area. And my samplers were so avid and quick that all I could do was sit in a chair next to the ice chest where the vials would go in and hand out fresh vials while everybody's, let's get that one, It was really fun. And this ended up being the top spot with 53 species, of which 74% were original to the 3 sites or unique to the 3 sites. So once you get the moths frozen after sampling, and that's as humane a way as I know to kill cold-blooded creatures, just keep cooling it until it's done. Then we take these back to the Oregon State Arthropod collection up in Corvallis at OSU and lay all the moths out, and then Paul Hammond and I will sit there and if there's more than one of something, we'll take the best one as a voucher. And at any rate, the little processing goes: take the frozen samples, empty the vials, sort and identify, choose your vouchers to pin up. And I do all the pinning, not by choice, but Paul does want to do it. And then make your labels, and then when everything's dried in about a week, you cut out your little labels, and you've got the when and where and identifications by then, hopefully, or if not, then you work on the tough ones. Then they'll go into the SAC collection, the Oregon State Arthropod collection. So I've been associated with that ever since I showed up in the entomology department. It's just who I am. So it's been delightful. And then ultimately a database and a report. Thanks. Next. And so this is just the process of having chosen your vouchers, the classic spreading board, trying to get the wings even up, approximately right angles, and so you can see all the features that you need to identify similar species. Okay. And here's just a long morning's work out at Malheur one time. That just shows you what it's all about. And then this, on the left is just some of the specimens that came from Lynn Cappins some years ago. She did a 3-year study at her house, and she and I are trying to duplicate that to some extent monthly. And so those are some of the beauties that came into her place. But on the right, all of these
moths that are now mounted and labeled in unit trays are what we got from those 3 nights. And I forget how many, it's 100 and something moths right there. But that's what you end up with. And this was, kind of late August. So that kind of is a seasonal assemblage that you'll find at that particular set of areas. And it changes all through. There's spring, summer, fall, even overwintering species. And and of course, host plant habitat, all that changes up the mix. So I pretty much went through this. I guess altogether, the fun thing is to look at this, about 91 species overall, at least at this point, my preliminary results from last year. And if you think about it, we collected 241 moths representing 91 species. So that's less than 3 individuals on average from any of those species populations, which is pretty minimal when you're sampling one night in an area where they're flying a minimum of 2 or 3 weeks for each species. So I think it's on top of doing pretty well species wise. It's just you get good specimens rather than they're rattling around a bucket. So I do prefer the wild approach. Plus, people get to experience it, and everybody's been enthusiastic, so that's appreciated. Okay. All right, so just a quick overview now. This was from a little earlier when I was giving a co-presentation with Glenn Fine, who's a fine mother out of the Mount Eddy area. Probably knows more than I do about moths in the region. He's been at it for 6 years in his backyard and nearby. So he was just great to talk to and see what he'd come across. Next. And so the Siskiyou Crest Coalition is the group that decided to take on this project that I functionally proposed and kind of pilot sampled with them. So that was really exciting. And sort of the fiscal group within it is Southgate Siskiyou Alliance, Ludiger. I've given moth nights at the Crest at Willow Wit last year, which will happen again in combination with Pollinator Project. Maya at the Selberg Institute had a moth night. Let's see, Williams Applegate. It's wonderful the way that everybody pitches in as a group with their skills, their skill levels, and what they're good at to help the whole project come together. Everybody, pitches in a piece of the pie and has a certain skill that's needed. It's too bad that Matt's not here because he was very generous in helping us have space and time to present all the volunteers with the project, how it was going to be done, hand out equipment, and do some moth sampling on site at Herb Farm. So anyway, Matt's a great guy. I appreciate him. Okay. So this is just a quick few slides to introduce you for those who haven't looked at this. You can probably just, if you take away Siskiyou Crest Moth Project, look that up on your phone or your computer, and you'll get the whole story. This is where that group that I just showed you on this, the Sporting Coalition and myself are invested in. And we've been doing pretty good. We've gotten some, we're something like more than half over a fairly meager asking total for the year. But at any rate, I'm sure this is just because there's so many needy projects and worthy projects. So it's been a little tough. But it's very exciting. As I mentioned, and as you know, it's a hugely diverse area. We're trying to document the moths on top of everything else that is known, so that we can recognize what's there and maybe make some judgment about, what areas in particular are particularly important to certain of the rare or endemic populations. Next. Just as reference, this is the Siskiyou Crest. It's an enormous area. It's almost a joke trying to take it on, but you got to start somewhere, and I'd rather shoot high than just do something that isn't too meaningful or significant. Next. This is what it looks like at night when you're working the sheets and wait for the moths to come in and snap in your photos and filing the ones that we need for vouchers. And it's really the volunteers who make this possible because I can't be in all these places. I can take the moths and get them dealt with once they're sampled, but having samplers has been really, really helpful, essential. Okay. Well, we chose our little moth mascot for the study as the Haedena Siskiyou, otherwise known as the Siskiyou Haedena. And it's a moth that's functionally endemic to the area, or at least has its largest populations in the Siskiyou. So it's a good one for that, and not unattractive. There are brighter moths, but I think this one's special. Likely feeds on a very limited number or even a single host plant. So we still have that to discover that for sure. Okay. Yeah, and there's this guy. Let me see him again, but I'm the scientist, as it were, for the project, and working at Oregon State University, I can facilitate everything from the field to the collection. And it's a joy to do so. Okay. And this is just a quick look at the sites that we've chosen from Colstein and Newberger and site on Ashland. There's this must be Elliott Creek where Luke and Susie are at. This is Linda's at Humbug Creek. This would be the kind of observation peak area in the Oregon Caves, which we'll be getting up into the Bigelow Lakes Basin as a sample. And then we have folks, Romaine and others from the Kilma, sampling to the west. It's gonna be close. Okay, so there's the bottom line. And the next. Love it. I met this guy in Corvallis out on a hot summer day, and he said his name was Jim Baker, and I immediately flashed to the collection that came in 25 years before, and we had it at the museum. So it was just a pleasure to talk to him. And I think that's about it. And if you are interested at all in that butterfly atlas or just looking into looking into it, that's Jeff's way of getting a hold of a way to purchase it. And he'll be down on May 2nd, as Christine mentioned. And I guess that's that. Questions? Yeah.
So just repeat the question.
Sure.
Where the other
Sure.
So you always have to know what the larva is doing as well as the adult.
You always have to know what the larvae is doing as well as the adult. Yeah, essentially it's all about seasonal timing and the larval host plant for a given moth that you may be looking for. Caterpillars kind of have their own schedule. Some overwinter, some feed heavily in the spring, some have multiple generations. But yeah, the bottom line is larval host plants. If you're in that area at the right time of year, you'll get the adults. And likewise, if caterpillars are present, if your timing is right, you can find them there as well. Yes.
So I use INET a lot. Do you, the organization group, use INET to look for, rare stuff or, information on, lost and stuff?
So when you say the organization,
What, I mean, for you, you use, INET to look for,
so
citing the butterflies you're targeting?
that's a great idea. That's using INAT to locate species you're looking for is a great way to do it. That's one of the values of INAT. In those cases, sometimes rare things are obscured, which is okay. Diane Keller, who lives in Ashland, has taken on the task of amassing all the INAT records for the Siskiyou Crest. So she's keeping track of that, and as I get identifications, I'll hand them to her as well as the samplers so that they know what's coming in, and she can add that to the list.
The information I put in there or other people put in there are being useful. and it's something and not.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. No, it's become a tremendous resource. And, you know, I admittedly, I found that INAT, you know, isn't perfect.
Does.
And that just because you get through people calling it something doesn't make it that. But I think, you know, the percentage of correct identifications is getting better and better. Good work, them. Get you close. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, go
yeah,
ahead.
so you mentioned a number of types of butterflies. I've heard these names like skipper and hairstreak, blue, primary, and checker spot, etc. Are those grouped by genus? Are they what characterizes these groups like that?
Sure. Yeah. So the question is what characterizes sort of the groups that we call checker spots, skippers, swallowtails, beards, whatever it is. That's kind of, you know, on one level, if it's taken from the family name, purity, peerage, sulfurs and whites, that sort of, it typically groups related taxa. So you're talking about a group of butterflies that are related, either within a family or within a subfamily or a genus. So that's kind of where that comes in. I learned Latin before I learned the common names. And I think I've got the butterflies down pretty well now. Of course, they just changed a bunch of the Latin names again. So that's always exciting. But with the moths now, that for me was almost all Latin, except for some of the large charismatic moths that would have common names. But in this latest field guide, the Moths of Western North America by Lecky, she puts a common name to everything. So I've got however many moths I know, I've got that many more common names to learn to go with the Latin. Christina?
I was just gonna put in a plug for Moth Night. It's Friday, July 17 up at the Crest. It starts, I suppose, last time it started, what it's something like that, 5 o'clock maybe. And it's a family friendly event. If you want to sleep over, they have wall tents, Crest does, that you can rent. So check it out soon on the website of PQRB and also the Crest. And Dana will be there, the star.
So Christina was announcing that there will be a moth night that people can attend and see moths coming to the sheet, learning about moths at a beautiful site called the Crest at Willow-Witt up at Grizzly Peak to the east of I-5 here. So that's open to the public. Yes.
What's the best way to donate to the Moth Project at the Siskiyou Crest?
I would look it up, go to the page, and there's like multiple donate buttons. Yeah, and you can just
Siskiyou Crest.
Yeah, yeah, it's within that. But you'll get right to it on the coalition site if you go Siskiyou Crest Moth Project. Yes,
I have some questions. Some of it kind of goes back
sure.
to parts of your presentation, so I didn't want to keep raising my hand.
No.
But I guess there was a butterfly that had the word elfin in the name, and I was wondering if that's related to the mushroom elfin saddle in any way.
You know, I have to admit that,
They're all elves.
you know,
That's the connection.
Yeah.
yeah. No, they're just, you know, found common names that take hold, and therefore those related butterflies, you know, end up with that common name. So, yeah, a western pine elfin, you know, a hoary elfin, or like a mylitic crescent, a field crescent. Those are just related butterflies. The common names are easier for a lot of people than Latin names. So, yeah.
Let's see. There's definitely, do you know who Christy Mercantile is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's been chiming in and Linda Kaplan and stuff, so I'm not gonna read everything, but so Christy asked, how are species verified in Oregon besides specimens?
You know, fortunately, there are many species that have very identifiable wing patterns. And so you're basically looking at wing patterns. And for live moths, that's often the closed wings. So you're already seeing is the forewings. But again, the field guide does a good job of pointing out identifiable field marks that are usually visible. It's a little tough if you need to see a hind wing or the underside of the wing or something like that. That's where the pin specimens are the go-to. And even then, sometimes there are species where you need to break off a leg and, send it in to have the DNA looked at to tell you which one it is.
Well, a couple more Christie questions. Unique to site means, is that like a disjunct population or a new for bioregion?
Yeah,
I don't know what that means.
yeah. So it's like, what was I talking about when I was talking a group of, saying a certain percentage of moths were unique to a site? That was just based on those 3 sites that we sampled. And if you look at the species lists for each site, those were the ones that were only taken at that 1 of 3 sites. So if half the species out of 40 were from Colstein and nobody else had them, those were unique to that site for that sample date. And those sites.
And then Susan, Rodenbush asked, has anyone surveyed moths across several months at a specific site?
Absolutely. I started out my moth sampling, not here, but up on the Upper Mackenzie River at the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest. And we sampled that 3 years in a row, every 2 weeks, spring through fall. And every year you're getting more and more and more. A lot of most of the species that you're going to find at a given spot will be uncommon to rare. So it's those singletons that really add up over time that just pop in on occasion. They're so small populations or weird little habitats and host plants, or they're migratory.
And Linda said also at her home too. Linda Cappen's home.
Right. We did 3 years at Linda's place and she got over 200 species there.
That's in the Applegate.
That's the Applegate up Humboldt Creek. And she and I are working to sample that again this year.
And is there also a Siskiyou Crest native bee project? Christy kind of answered it here saying the Oregon Bee Atlas. Throughout the state, but I don't know if you have any more about
No, that
the native bee project.
yeah, the Oregon Bee Atlas is pretty amazing. Talk about volunteers and people who pay to train and learn to be melitologists. Really devoted folks all over the state, hundreds of people, and that all goes back to Link at the headquarters there at OSU, where he and a couple of people are in charge of doing all the identifications. So that's an enormous project, but it partly stems down here on trying to relocate a possibly extinct bumblebee called Franklin's bumblebee. But while you're doing that, you're cataloging and documenting an enormous amount of the fauna everywhere people look. So it's really a great project. And just they've got great software and it's a really neat site. I would look it up.
Okay, I think that's it from the Zoomers.
All right, thank you, Zoomers.
Yeah, thank you, Zoomers.
Yes.
Yeah, just a little bit of a specific question. One of your last butterfly slides that you showed where you had moths. I think it was a sample from the atlas showing different species and sort of their primary host plant. One of my just happened to notice was associated with Phragmites osculus. I may be mispronouncing that.
Right, that would be the
which is in
Yuma skipper. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I guess my question is around the idea: is this is now an invasive species?
My understanding on that plant
Oh,
is that there are sort of 2 almost cryptic varieties, of which one is accessible to the female skipper. She will recognize it as a host plant, whereas another one is not. And the problem has been that they take out all of them when they want to remove that as a weed. So that's been part of the problem with hanging on to those Yuma skipper populations, is that there's probably a way for a good botanist to tell the 2 apart, but those 2 types of that plant are apparently there.
I guess my question is along the line of, is the butterfly itself has it come along with the introduced Phragmites, or is it
Yeah, I don't think the introduced Phragmites are what they're looking for. The females can tell chemically what it is that they need, and they originate in pretty small microhabitats most of the time, at least in the Northwest, where the butterfly and the plant occurs. So, yeah, if you're down in Sacramento Delta, I think there's a lot of habitat, but as you come north through desert country, you lose it.
Well, yeah, they're trying to remove it like crazy.
Yeah, and it's really, it's just, it could well drive that butterfly to extinction.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.